By the grace of God, and I can't believe it, I never thought I would have almost 20 years clean.
Man, I'm so grateful that I can express my feelings today and I ain't got to be ashamed.
Rising above my circumstances. And it was like one of those, moments, you know what I'm saying?
Sister Jackie Toben is joining us to tell us about her work with Let's Start and how she found this unmet need. Sister, thank you for joining us.
Sure, thank you. I think probably the best way to tell how I found this unmet need is to tell some stories. First story, I was working at Library High School here in the city of St. Louis, North Side, African-American school, all girls. And during the summer, had some extra time on my hands. And in typical Notre Dame fashion, I said to myself, you should be doing something else. It just so happened that when that thought passed through my mind, I picked up the paper and there was a picture on the front page of the paper of the new superintendent who was going to be at the city jail, the city workhouse. And I thought to myself, I could go over there and tutor. And so I did that with the help of Reverend Bynes. I got in and started tutoring a couple times a week during the summer. And while I was there, one day it occurred to me, why not go down and just see the women's section, see what's going on in that section of this jail. So they let me go down, and that's when I started talking with the women. And I would go down there frequently with absolutely no agenda, just went down and talked with them, and was delightful. They would tell me stories, they would tell me about their children, that sort of thing. And one of them even said one day, they were talking about why they were there and that sort of thing, and they said, you don't have a clue what we're talking about, do you? And I remember distinctly saying, no, I don't, but I can learn. And I think from that moment, I realized that I would like to be working with those women, and I can learn from them what they need and how to do it. And that's how it all started. So at that time, the Vincent de Paul Society was starting the criminal justice ministry, and I applied for a job with them and fortunately was hired. I was hired to provide and coordinate volunteers in the jails throughout the Archdiocese of St. Louis, and also to provide direct services for the women who were incarcerated. And so that's how it really began. I started listening to the women at the two jails here, the one in the city and the one in the county, and they would ask me to call their mom to see how their children were doing. They would ask me to call their public defender. So that's how I got involved in their lives. I did that for 7 years and then left that ministry and ended up at St. Vincent's Church here in the city. And it just so happened that the halfway house for women coming out of the prison system was located several blocks from the church. And made perfect sense then to go hang out at the halfway house. So that's what I did. Took volunteers from the parish with me. We would have birthday parties. Because it was a halfway house, the women could leave the institution. So we would frequently, with a few of them, have coffee. We would cook a meal sometimes, just to walk in the park, whatever. But what I consider the birthday of Let's Start happened on an August afternoon. 3 women and myself, Sandra Ware, Holly Clemens, and Mary Cobb. We had a liter of soda and a bag of potato chips, and we were down by Union Station, and there's a fountain across the street from Union Station, a lovely little park, and we were sitting there eating and drinking our chips and soda, and one of the women, Sandra Ware, said, we should offer this kind of support for more women. And my first response was, oh, Sandra, how can we do that? Blah, 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 you know, that sort of thing. And she stopped me mid-sentence and she said, no, let's start. And that was it. We kept that name. The following Tuesday evening, we met at St. Vincent's Church, those 3 women and myself. And from that day to this, every Tuesday evening at St. Vincent's Church, there's a group of women who meet, former prisoners, people who are coming out of the institution, and they're there to support each other. What I learned early on was that the women know what they need. I said to Sandra at one point, Sandra, this isn't going to work. People don't have transportation. We can't provide transportation. They live all over the city. Again, she said, oh, it'll work. She said, just remember, when we needed our drugs, we figured out how to get them. If we want to be here, we'll be here. And she was correct. They get themselves there, and we help each other home, but they get themselves there. And now on any given Tuesday, we'll have between 25 to 45 women show up. And over the course of the years, we became aware also that the women are mothers, and so their children are impacted by the fact that mom has been in prison and that mom has been on the streets using drugs. So we started doing work with the children also. And we started, first of all, by providing transportation, a bus trip for children to visit their moms in prison. And we would go up there every month and have them visit with their moms. And a follow-up to that was the children needed support. So we eventually hired a therapist to work with the children. And not your typical therapist who sits in an office and the children come to him. He would go to the homes. And he frequently went to the school and did work with the counselors and teachers at school when kids were having issues. We also started at that time a caregiver group to support the grandmas who ended up taking care of the children. So that's been the course over the years. What we realized also early on was that the women had powerful stories to tell.
I shoplift as a way to support my drug habit. And so I can't give back the things that I stole, but I can certainly give back to the women that's coming behind me to tell my story, to help them know that it is a way out. I found a way out, and there's hope for me that there is hope for them.
And it was important that we educate the community about the stories that they've experienced, about their life realities, and about the issues, laws, that sort of thing that have positively or negatively impacted their lives. So we did a lot of talks in the community. And when I say we, my role typically was to provide transportation and introduce the women. And they would talk about what their lives, what they have experienced, and how laws and policies have affected them. We would go to Jeff City, the state capital, talk with policymakers up there, and frequently we would invite policymakers to group so they could interact with the women of the group. Voting for the women, when they finished their parole and were able to vote, that was a big deal. That was celebration time for them. So we really did, we focused on three things: the direct support of the women, education of the community, and a little bit of advocacy based on the issues that were important to them. When I think back on that whole reality, I realized that it wasn't something that I planned. I didn't set out at a certain point saying, I'm going to be working with women coming out of prison. That's my goal. That didn't happen at all. It's like one of the women said to me one time too. She said, you know, when we were young and we planned what we wanted to do with our lives, we didn't sit down and say, I want to be a dope fiend and go to prison. That didn't happen. It's sort of life just kind of puts you in a place where you make certain choices, and those choices affect what you do the rest of your life. So the fact that I read that newspaper that one day made a difference in my getting in that institution. The fact that those three women said to me, let's start, and the fact that I had enough sense to listen to them, I think was really, really important in this whole process. There's a thing in your sent, where, what is it? Here, let me just look at this here a minute. Yeah. Like her, Teresa, we educate in schools and in other areas of urgent need. Like her, we exclude no one from our concern, but are especially sensitive to youth and women, and are impelled to prefer the poor. I love that word, impelled. I think that's a kind of, how can you not do it? But that phrase, after the fact, has been the motivation and the reality that keeps me connected with School Sisters of Notre Dame, You Are Sent, and our mission to be out there with folks who are on the margins. That's really important to me at this stage in my life. There's another place in You Are Sent where it says that we're open in a new way to the initiative of God in our lives. And I think about that line often because I realize it wasn't my initiative that got me started in all of this. There was some inner something, and we can call it whatever we want. I'll go ahead and call it God. There was some inner something that compelled me, impelled me, whatever, to keep going on this path, on that journey. So that's why I'm here today. And the other thing that I've learned through this whole process is how important education is. Education is the way out of poverty, the education that the women receive, not just school education, and that's critical, but education that builds confidence and self-confidence and awareness and realizing that the world is bigger than their tiny reality. All of that is so critical for them to succeed as they move on in their lives. And that's why today, I'm not directly involved with Let's Start anymore. I'm retired from that ministry. I am on the board of directors, but that's the extent of the ministry with Let's Start and connection with the women. They're in my heart, and we talk a lot. But I tutor now in an alternative school here in St. Louis for young adults who can't make it in the normal high school situation. And I've chosen to do that as my volunteer work because I believe in education. I believe so much that for those young adults that I'm working with, if they're going to stay out of prison and live the realities of Let's Start Women, they need that foundation. So that's where I am, and that's my story.
Did I tell you, Jackie, that of course we both know Joan Lippick, and she's wonderful, and she loves Let's Start.
She loves Let's Start.
And she's so funny because she would always come to me and say, now they have a real mission. They have a real mission. They have a, she said, well, Joan, you ought to get a mission.
As if Rosada Kane doesn't have a mission, huh?
Yeah. Well, our mission is to educate kids and give them enough confidence and sense of self-worth that they don't end up in Jackie's program.
Perfect. And she can agree with that, I'm sure. Yeah.
The director of Let's Start now.
Well, we're merged with Criminal Justice Ministry.
Oh, that's right. That's
and
right.
Toni Jordan is the Let's Start participant who's the Women's Support Coordinator. She's our contact person over there.
Okay, Toni Jordan. Okay.
Toni Jordan, yeah. She's the one who's going to get that Women of Achievement Award.
Oh, right. The Joan talked about.
And I helped, yeah. Mm-hmm. Because of all this pandemic thing, they're not having a luncheon this year. So they had a ceremony at Fox Theater for just the women themselves, and they taped it, and it's going to be on Channel 9, the 14th of this month at 7 o'clock. Because it's a miracle that she was accepted. Joan and I sent that in just as a way of saying, we'll stretch these West County ladies a little bit to have them see another reality and let them see that people who have had lifestyles very different from theirs can do good. And yeah.
And was Toni one of the women that came through the program?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. She was a Let's Start participant for years. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. That is
interestingly, talk about small city St. Louis. Toni's daughter, Jodacia, was having trouble. Well, I knew Jodacia when she was like a little girl because Toni would bring her to Let's Start with her. But anyway, she's a teenager. Well, she graduated from high school 2 years ago. I tutored her at Innovative Concept Academy.
That's great. That is wonderful.
Because needs are everywhere.
Oh, yes.
Uh-huh.
There was a period of time when I guess people were struggling with their own sense of ministry and mission and whatever. And they would say, well, you know, you're in Catholic school, you're saving the saved. I want to say, oh man, if this if this is the saved, you know, it's really bad other places. But no,
Exactly.
those needs are everywhere.
For sure. Like the women of Let's Start would do talks and days of recollection for Nearings High School, Koryezu,
Rosati Kane.
Station Academy, yeah, Rosati Kane. And you would be, well, no, you wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
At those wealthier schools, girls would have tears. My uncle, my brother is an addict. My best friend. I mean, it's like, it's there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. The kids in that you're talking to can relate.
Oh, telling.
Just because they're incredibly empathetic, but others because it touches their experience.
Okay, well, great.
Thank you so very, very much. And of course, we're very aware that wherever there's one school sister of Notre Dame, we're all there with her. And so thank you for taking us to that ministry.